Nearly 24 hours after the, quote, horrific day in Boston, and an international manhunt is now underway for the person or people responsible for a deadly terror attack at the Boston Marathon. Welcome to America Live, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. We are now just 22 hours removed from that dual bombing that left 3 people dead, including an 8-year-old child, and many, many more injured. Over the past few hours, we have received several significant news updates. We believe at this hour that the bomber is still on the loose, but we are learning about new clues found at the terror scene. Sources telling Fox News that remnants of pressure cookers were found. This style of bomb used frequently in Afghanistan, and also part of the bomb-making apparatus an al-Qaeda-affiliated would-be bomber was caught with back in 2011 in a thwarted bombing of the Fort Hood military installation. We are also told that the feds are scanning cell phone tower records for what's being called the moment of detonation. And we received new video in the Fox newsroom moments ago, offering a new view of the moment when a beautiful race day turned into one of America's darkest hours.
The only marathon in the world, not going to be a Olympic marathon, but that is the only marathon in the world, not going to be a Olympic marathon, but that is
Here is what we know right now. The bombs appear to have been packed with shrapnel to ensure maximum damage. The chief of emergency services at Mass General says doctors have removed pellets and nails from the victims. That hospital alone treated 31 people and performed 4 amputations. At this point, authorities are staying tight-lipped on possible suspects. The FBI will not confirm or deny anything. Those sources are still telling Fox News that, quote, a person of interest is being questioned. Just hours ago, the FBI also confirming this will be a worldwide investigation, promising to go to the ends of the earth to find whoever is responsible. All told, police say 176 people were injured, 17 critically, and again, 3 people are dead, including an 8-year-old little boy. Bill Hemmer is the co-host of America's Newsroom. He's live in Boston. Bill, what is the very latest with the forensics investigation as we now know it?
Yeah, good afternoon, Megyn. So many times in stories like these, when they are this young, only 22 hours old now, it is as important to say what we cannot report as much as we can say we are reporting. I tell you that because of this. The Massachusetts governor, Deval Patrick, said earlier today there were no other unexploded devices found. That is critical, because even late last night, there were reports that 2 to 5 other unexploded packages were on the streets of Boston. That is simply not true. Second, no other known additional threats. That's new this morning as well. And also, no one said to be in custody. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But part of the heart of this investigation, it is the forensics. It's also talking to eyewitnesses who were here yesterday. During the briefing earlier today, at least half a dozen times, they implored the public, if you have pictures, if you have video, if you've seen anything, they want to talk to you. A Boston Herald reporter told me that police were at Logan's International Airport stopping people who are flying out of Boston who had come here for the race specifically, asking them if they have any pictures or video on their iPhones that police can take a look at. It is fascinating police work here. With regard to the forensics, the surgeon at Massachusetts General earlier today, he was describing these little metal fragments that were embedded in many of the victims. He described some of these victims as having 10 to 20, as many as 40 different metal fragments lodged inside of their body that they were slowly picking out and removing from the skin. Whether it was metal fragments or BBs possibly that were loaded into these pressure cookers, or some other sort of projectile that was then used as shrapnel to inflict as much harm and damage to as many people as possible. You mentioned this pressure cooker. It's a major source of the investigation now that it is possible now that this pressure cooker was dropped into a black duffel bag and left on the side of the street in 2 different locations, and that is where you would find the source of these explosions at 2:50 yesterday afternoon, Megyn.
A clearer picture is starting to emerge about how this was done, although we still do not know who. Now, over the past 22 hours, Bill, there has been much talk of a Saudi national. We are told he is a college student, a 20-year-old who is in the hospital. And there's been a lot of back and forth about whether this is a person of interest. We're told the FBI raided his house last night, or Boston police raided his house last night, his apartment. What do we know about this Saudi national?
Yeah. Said to be 20 years old, from the town of Medina in Saudi Arabia, which is near Mecca. Had come here on a visa to study English, was living in the town of Revere, that's a city or a suburb north of Boston, by several miles. And apparently he's being treated for burns to his body. Now, he is not said to be a suspect, and authorities have told us at Fox here that he gave them permission to go into his apartment late last night, and authorities did just that. He has roommates. It's a building maybe 15 or 16 stories tall in the town of Revere. At about 2 a.m., they brought out bags of evidence. We don't know what was inside there, but he is said to be cooperating with authorities inside of that hospital room now. Jonathan Wachtel, one of our Fox producers, talked to one of his roommates a short time ago. This is part of the conversation they had now. Listen carefully here.
On at the marathon, do you think your friend did it?
No, I don't think so.
Why?
No, because they're good people.
What's your friend like?
Yeah, they're studying, and I haven't heard about that. I haven't heard about.
What can you tell us about your friend? What is he?
Let me go to school, dude.
And a brief conversation from earlier today, Megyn, I want to stress now, he is not considered, this 20-year-old Saudi national, not considered a suspect. And from earlier today, police said, quote, no one is in custody. Megyn.
Bill Hemmer, thank you, friend. See you soon. Well, law enforcement now poring over images and video from the scene. You heard Bill talking about how they are asking anyone who was there to send them pictures. What you are about to see is just one example of what authorities are looking at. You will see a man cross the finish line and kiss his children. Then you will hear the first explosion. And 12 seconds or so later, you will hear the second blast. Listen here. Know that 3 people were killed and just under 200 people were injured in those moments. The authorities will also be looking at this video where moments after the explosion, look, you see 2 large pieces, more than 2, but there's 2 we've highlighted for you, of metal flying. We have spot shadowed them here. These are just a couple of pieces of evidence that the investigators will use to try to determine who may be behind this terrible event. Coming up a little later in the show, we're going to go through this video with one of the world's foremost explosives experts who has worked on nearly every major terror investigation in recent memory, including the 1983 bombing of the U.S. Embassy in Lebanon, the downing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland, again by a bomb, and the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center. We are honored to have this man as our guest, and we will go through it with him shortly together. Well, Bill brought us the breaking news a moment ago about how these bombs were placed, we believe, in black duffel bags and left on the scene. We are also hearing bomb sweeps were made prior to the first runners crossing the marathon finish. And nothing was found that could have led police to believe that an attack was going to happen. That is what the authorities are telling us. Listen here to Boston's police commissioner detailing that effort.
There is an EOD sweep that was done. There were 2 of them done that morning. One was done early in the morning, and a second one was done an hour before the first runners came across. Those 2 EOD sweeps did not turn up any evidence. But because there is unrestricted access to the race course, simply because it's 28 miles long, people can come and go and bring items in and out.
That's the thing. I mean, how do you secure that lengthy a sporting event? You know, that huge a sporting event. Well, earlier today, hospital officials confirmed that the explosive devices detonated contained metal fragments. We talked about that a bit earlier, and Trace Gallagher has more on that live from our West Coast newsroom today. Trace?
And if I can go back, Megyn, just kind of expound on the breaking news that Bill Hemmer brought us about those pressure cookers at the top of the hour, with more reporting, wonderful reporting by Jennifer Griffin and Catherine Herridge, kind of giving us more detail about these 4 or 6 quart pressure cookers they believe might be behind this. The cookers apparently were in a backpack, and in those backpacks was also a board, and the cooker may or may not have been attached to a board, and outside the board there may have been a jar of nails and BBs and pellets inside the jar. The unclear thing about this, Megyn, is what the explosive was inside of that backpack, but there is some speculation the explosive, whatever it was, may not have been tamped down very tightly, and that may have led to the explosion going outward instead of upward. We could also point out that back in May of 2010, there was an attempted attack on Times Square, and they found about 130 different firecrackers inside a pressure cooker. And you mentioned at the top of the hour, a man named Nasser Abdo was arrested in Killeen, Texas. He was believed to have been wanting to bomb some restaurants where soldiers at Fort Hood frequented, and he too was found with 2 pressure cookers. Now, again, we do not know what the explosive material was inside these, but the very word improvised explosive device means these homemade bombs are built with really whatever you have on hand. The area, you said earlier, Megyn, in Boston was swept for explosives a couple of times, but as experts point out, detecting explosives is often very difficult, especially if they're in liquid form that can be mixed up at the scene. That's the reason that airplanes will not let people on board with more than 3 ounces of liquids, because the more you have, the more you can mix up. Whatever the device was, pressure cooker or not, whatever it was detonated with, experts say these bombs always leave a very distinct signature. Listen here.
If you're seeing something built from items, chemicals that are underneath your kitchen sink, that's a whole different thing. So the explosive is going to set the signature more than anything else. But still, it's the type of components that were used that may give us a general idea of who may be responsible as it compared to previous events.
And now, of course, it's up to investigators, Megyn, to try and piece all of this together and find out what the trigger was and exactly what the IED was made up of.
We're going to have much more on that in just a bit. Trace, thank you. We are also learning more about the many victims of this attack. Would you look at this picture? Look at that picture. That is 8-year-old Martin Richard, who was the youngest to die. A picture with a sign he made for school in a heartbreaking photo that can only add to the sorrow. For the dead and the wounded, we will have his story just ahead.